3 years ago this month, the Assembly passed the Integrated Education Act. This was a private member's bill brought by Alliance MLA Kellie Armstrong. The bill, which broadened the definition of integrated education and increased the scope of the statutory duty to provide for it, was passed by MLAs. This received a lot of attention at the time and was seen as a major achievement by the Alliance Party ahead of the elections that year. I'm delighted we are joined by Kellie Armstrong, the Alliance MLA for Strangford and author of this bill, so who better to talk to? Kellie, welcome to Stormont Sources.
Thank you very much, David.
Okay, Kellie, just to ask, I know integrated education is Alliance's bread and butter, but what were you hoping to achieve with the passage of this bill?
To be honest, I was watching the good relations indicators and noted that 1 in 5 children who applied first preference to integrated schools were being refused a place because there just weren't enough places. And with integrated education, being part of the system but not having a sectoral body meant that, to be honest, in area planning, I didn't think it was getting a fair shot. We had certainly some schools that were transforming to become integrated. We had the grant maintained schools, but other than the new mid-down integrated college that's coming forward, there isn't a lot of support out there from parents to want to actually risk their homes to set up a school and pay for it for a few years before it's accepted into the official school network. So my bill was to recognise that integrated education is more than just about Catholics and Protestants attending school together. It talks about the differences between socioeconomic variations. It talks about the difference in all the different religions that we have and the diversity in Northern Ireland. And it talks about the fact that integrated schools do have that mix of children from academic, non-academic and from special education needs within each class. So wanted to reflect that. I also added in a few twists and turns into the bill that I knew rightly was going to be pulled out and changed. Like, for instance, every new school should be an integrated school. I had a fair idea that wasn't going to last too long. But the main purpose was to get that support element built in within the bill so that there would be something there that would give integrated education more of an opportunity to have help and support in the same way that the sectoral bodies do, of course, very well for the controlled and maintained schools.
Whatever, I suppose it's hard to know where, but just whenever you pass this month, 3 years ago, has it delivered the ambition? Are you where we thought we would be today when you passed the bill?
In some ways, yes, and in other ways, no. So in some ways, yes, there has been a delightful number of schools have now transformed. So the numbers have gone up. Where we were sitting before 7-8%, we're now up to 10% of the school population. Is it where I would like it to be? No, because I feel that the bill, for many different reasons, seems to have alienated unionists. And I don't know why, because the majority of schools that are within the integrated sector are actually transformed schools now. We've almost got as many controlled schools transformed to become integrated as we have grant maintained integrated schools. So on that side of it, when you're working towards peace building and a society where children can be educated together, to have one section of the community so opposed to it, it makes me sort of question why. We weren't seeking, I think that the narrative at the time was that we were seeking to do something very different and special for integrated education, when in actual fact it still doesn't have a sectoral body. It still isn't earmarked within area planning for any special. The perception that integrated education gets more money was always a lot of nonsense. They get the same amount of money per pupil as other schools. So my concern now is, and I've shared this with the integrated movement, the difficulty that political unionism seems to have with integrated education. In the past it would have been political nationalism, but now it's more political unionism have an issue with children being educated together, and the definition of integrated education seems to have rocked a lot of boats.
Okay, I'm going to pick up with a couple of those with you in a bit, but Michael, I know you're a supporter of integrated education, so go ahead.
Yeah, David, actually, hello Kellie, you're very welcome to Stormont Sources, and in line with the highest education or editorial standards of Stormont Sources, I have to declare an interest. I'm a director of the Integrated Education Fund and an enthusiastic supporter. of integrated education, and I was delighted with the passage of the bill, and I followed the debate closely. And I must say, I thought some of the debate was very good on all sides. I thought some people crossed the Rubicon when they understood the subject better. Pat Sheehan comes to mind, Sinn Féin. Others were a bit of a letdown when they came under a bit of pressure, and there was a bit of heat raised by other sectors towards the closure of the bill. Mike Nesbitt comes to mind there. And then one of the heroes of the hour at the final end was Doug Beattie, who refused to engage in the petition of concern that would have killed the thing right at the end. So that was my take on it. And then, of course, Kellie herself skillfully carrying it through all the debate, knowing when to compromise, knowing when to hold her ground. That was good political judgment. And I'm sorry, Kellie, I apologise in advance, but that brings me to a question you might consider slightly impertinent, which is, you had such a success with that, and electorally you've had such a success in taking from your predecessor a marginal alliance seat to win 2 seats out of 5 in Strangford and bring in your running mate. And I expected to see you sitting around the executive table. What happened?
No, well, I don't think that I'm up in the echelons of the leadership of Alliance. I'm one of those hard-working backbench MLAs. When Naomi was pulling forward her team, I, of course, had stepped back as being whip of the party during the process of the bill because, to be honest, it was all-encompassing. It took so much of mine and Fiona, my researchers' time. But no, I think, to be honest, somebody had put out a terrible rumour that we were going to get education in the pick. I don't think that either larger parties were going to allow Alliance to be able to get away with that one. But no, I think Naomi had her leadership team picked for that. Now, I am chair of the Committee on Procedures. I know it's not a statutory committee, it's a standing committee. So I'm delighted to be able to mess about with standing orders at the moment. But my legislation geek is up on a weekly basis. But no, it wouldn't have been me round the assembly table, and I didn't expect to be honest.
Well, I'll not push you any further on it, but I expected you to be, and I don't know what more you had to do to be there. But anyhow,
very kind.
over to you, Tim. You didn't like the bill.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, I'm if Michael's the integrated education person, and then I'm the token member of political unionism. So you may shudder at what questions I'm going to ask then, if those are Michael's questions. But no, I want to actually pick up, because you mentioned it yourself there on the definition in the bill. And I think some people would say, and I'd be interested in what you think about this. Certainly I think the Minister would say, and maybe the Department would say as well, that the definition of integrated education in the bill has actually made transformation more difficult. So what would you say about that?
I would say that's nonsense. Transformation wasn't touched by my bill. I deliberately did not tinker around the edges at all with the transformation legislation as it currently stands. The regulation and the legislation on that is as it was 4 years ago rather than 3 years ago. I think what the difficulty I have is that when you talk about controlled schools or maintained schools, integrated schools, Irish medium schools, they all have a particular ethos that people can recognise. And when integrated schools is talked about, all controlled schools are integrated, having the doors open is not integration. Integrated education is an ethos, and it's an intentional ability or an intentional type of education that forces children and their teachers and all of the classroom assistants and anybody else that works in the school and the boards of governors to intentionally look at how we deal with each other, cultural differences, cultural celebrations, right down to in English, for instance, they'll talk about Irish poets, English poets, it'll be that it's so intentional, but it sort of annoys me. It's like saying to somebody, you're only Catholic because you go into Mass once a week. It's actually what you do when you get in there is the important thing. So it's one of those things that I wish that the politicisation of it would just take a stop, because there are so many more parents out there who recognise that integrated education is not the big scary monster that it has been made out to be. And so many controlled schools have now added to their value by becoming integrated as well. So it's
Well, just picking up on that, because the definition, which is in your bill, does require the Minister to be satisfied that there's a reasonable number of people from a Protestant tradition and people from a Roman Catholic tradition. Now, I just wonder in areas, where there's a very low numbers of the population of each of those communities that could potentially go to that school to make it integrated. I mean, what were you thinking was going to happen? What was in your thinking during the bill's passage of how your test of integrated education could be met? If, say, in an area that's highly unionist or highly nationalist, it requires that reasonable prospect of significant numbers from the other community. How, in your mind, do you think that definition was going to be fulfilled?
Well, I didn't make the definition reasonable numbers. The definition of reasonable numbers has been there since day one of integrated education. What I did do was I added all faiths and none with a reasonable number of Catholics and Protestants. And if you look at the census data that has come out over the last number of years, there's actually more children in that all faiths and none than there are in the Catholic and Protestant side. So I tried to maintain what the initial purpose of integrated education was in bringing Catholics and Protestants together, but I expanded it in order to meet what Northern Ireland is today. There would be many more pupils and parents who would fit into the none category than all of the others added together. But one of the things is, and if you take, for instance, Park Hall integrated in Antrim, the number of Catholics or nationalists or whatever way you want to put it, families in the area is quite low. So reasonable numbers there could be 5% of the school population would be of a Catholic faith. Strangford College were close to me. I think the Catholic population on the Ards Peninsula is 11%. The school has purposefully looked for more Catholics, and now it's up to 24%, I think, in that school. So there's a way of doing integration where you can accept that there are minority religions in an area, but it's not a case of they're there as ticking a box. They're there because it's mixed with the diversity of the school. And it's also not just about pupils, and I can't get that through enough people's heads. Integrated education is about the teaching staff, it's about the Board of Governors, it's about all of the support staff that are involved with schools. It's about that mixing, intentional mixing across. And indeed, the Fermanagh Trust model of shared education talked about doing this from board level and getting people to work together before you went anywhere near classrooms. And I wish that some schools would do that, because they could actually save so much money through joint purchasing powers and things like that. But we didn't get to that proper aim.
I think that's the difficulty, isn't it, with this? Because, I mean, the Integrated Education Fund, where Michael sits on the board, I mean, they say integration is 40-40-20, and the department, and I think NICE as well, use the definition of 10% of the other community in the first year, and then 30% within a reasonable time. But it just does seem to me, and even the examples that you've used, it doesn't seem to me that there's a lot of places in Northern Ireland where that is a reasonable prospect. And I wonder, is that a fundamental weakness within integrated education, within your bill, that's going to be there until we address education sectors in a different way?
Well, to be honest, the Integrated Education Act is in place now because of the system that we have. Ultimately, I would like to have a single education system that has an integrated ethos attached to it, that everybody can go to school together and would all be respected and celebrated in one classroom. Reasonable numbers only cause an issue for those who want to put a number on it. I think that my family has a reasonable mix of people within it. Now, if I was to start counting the Catholics and Protestants and the nuns and the other faiths, it would be a very different setup, because I would have to go, right, we need to up the prod number here. So it's only a problem for those who need to put a number on it. But reasonable numbers have been integrated education from day one. That 40-40-20 was a target put in a long time ago. It's not in statute, never was, but it's used to batter integrated education. Which town in Northern Ireland has a breakdown of 40-40-20?
Yeah.
In fact, we'd probably have to change it to 50 non and other religions, and then 25-25.
But isn't that the flaw at the heart of integrated education, that we're trying to shoehorn something into a system where it doesn't work? And I think, I think that's the difficulty that the minister has. That's the difficulty the minister faced in Bangor, where you just can't have that reasonableness. The minister cannot be satisfied that there is going to be reasonable numbers from the other community that are going to come in. So until we address that,
I think we're going to be difficult behind those numbers. Mm-hmm. We know
the law, Michael.
We know also that people will move once there's the prospect of integrated education in their area, where it didn't exist before. Near where I live, there's a college that transformed to integrated. It was overwhelmingly Unionist Protestant, if you like, and it's now got a Catholic majority. People want integrated education. And the other myth, and Kellie's bill takes care of this, the other myth is that people are going to have integrated education forced upon them. The entire thrust of the bill is simply to say that where demand is identified, it must be met. It's not to impose anything on anyone. And Kellie, that's what makes the bill so good.
Just Kellie, because Michael's actually tied into the question I have for you, is that I'll be honest with you, that I would have a bit of skepticism around integrated education for the very simple reason of that. How do you actually truly get that proper integration in school? Because I listened to the back and forth in the assembly between Paul Given, yourself, and I think Nick Matheson in the chamber that day over the Bangor decision. I mean, in terms of the skepticism, how do you get around that? How do you actually turn, kind of old cynics like me and Tim around on this issue in terms of actually getting that balance right?
I would say talk to some of the pupils who have been at integrated schools, especially those who have maybe experienced another controlled or maintained school and then come to an integrated school, because the alumni who are the past pupils of integrated schools are amazing in how they describe it. And they talk about they go into class in the school that they maybe went to beforehand that wasn't integrated. And it was very much what you would expect. So in a controlled school, they had a harvest festival and so on. If you went to a Catholic maintained school, there was a lot of prayers and blessing yourself going into each class. Been through that myself. Whereas an integrated school, they actually force the questions. So they would say, well, what does being a Jehovah's Witness? What does that involve? Why don't you do birthdays? For somebody who's Catholic to be in that safe space to turn around to somebody and say, why is the 11th night bonfire so important to you? For those children to experience each other's cultures, and to be honest, integrated school children terrify the life out of me at times, because they would ask you anything, which they do on a regular basis. How much do you earn is one of the key ones. But they have no fear, they have no barrier, they have no blockage to what they want to find out. And then they just celebrate the person. So that's okay. So Elizabeth, that sits beside me, is Jehovah's Witness. Now I understand why she doesn't do Christmas. That's okay. Let's carry on. The children are amazing, and they have it's more than just the education. There's the balance there about society. And I'm not saying that other children don't get this, but it's more intentional in integrated education. And every day is a learning day about not just what you're learning in class, but about each other and about who we are and the opportunities that there are. It's not all negative. Oh, Catholic, they've the whole thing in Dairy Girls with the blackboard. It's not like that. It's more like the blackboard that would be in the middle to say what are the cultural similarities that we have and what's different and what can we celebrate. So that's the intentionality of it. I went through the Catholic school system, and I can honestly say I know exactly what that looks like. I know integrated education because I've been through it. My husband probably say the same about his controlled school education, but they were very different to integrated, and I can't get it clear enough to anybody. It's very hard to describe the difference, but those pupils are very good at doing it, where they say there is a difference. When you go from one type of school into integrated, it is not just about you walk into the classroom and you're all sitting in there together. You actively discuss who you are, what you are, and it might be the maths textbook that has a Muslim child pictured in it, or it could be in religion. You talk about, I know they did a thing in religion in GCSE where they compared all different religions, and it went back to, I think it was the flood, and they were comparing how the story weaved through lots of different religions, and it was so interesting to hear that. But it still celebrated each child's own unique perspective from their religion's point of view. So it's a very different way of working. It's not just you're here to learn English. You're actually here to learn English in a different way.
So how do we? Because another part of a nervousness that I have, Kellie, is that there is segregation in another way in our schooling system in Northern Ireland. That's between working class and middle class and above, and that's true in society. Not for a minute suggesting that is unique to Northern Ireland, but how do we stop that basically we create a whole bunch of very middle class schools and we create a whole bunch of schools that are working class and maybe don't perform as well? I mean, I appreciate that integrated education it doesn't touch upon this entirely. But that would be a fear a lot of parents would have in that, particularly you were talking there about some reticence within kind of Catholic community, in that there is at least the perception amongst the Catholic community that, I like yourself, Kellie, I'm a product of Catholic education, and people, it is a strongly held view that these schools perform well. So and that you're coming along to take this away from people. So how do you stop that? I suppose the word is that fear of that you're going to create, basically you're not dealing with integration in a class in a socioeconomic sense.
I think there's two things about this. So the first one is, oh my goodness, how competitive is the school system? Because each type of school is competing for the same child, and they all, I think, to be honest, we should call it what it is. They're like businesses, and they don't want to see their competitor getting another child more than they have. So that's why I found that the sectors, whenever my bill was going through, it was as much as they could do to complain, not for the benefit of the education system in Northern Ireland, but how they could protect themselves. But that's why in the bill I put the definition was more than just about religion. It's about the socioeconomic, and it has to be a balance of people, the socioeconomic backgrounds and abilities, and whatever the ability of the child is. Because we have a couple of test cases on this now. So you've got Slemish College, you've got Strangford College, and there's another one, but I can't think of its name at the moment. And they have a grammar stream. They have a secondary stream, and they have the special education needs part of their schools. And what we're finding, Shimna College doesn't have the grammar stream, but what it has shown is when you put children all into the classroom together of all different abilities, instead of dumbing down the smartest, it actually brings the whole class up. So part of integrated education is to say, it's perfectly acceptable for you to sit in class with somebody who's grade A everywhere and another person maybe who needs literacy help, because those children are valued for who they are, not their abilities or their class background. So in integrated schools, we do tend to have a higher number of children with free school meals. I was at a Board of Governors meeting last night where 42% of a primary school is special education needs, an integrated primary school. And, having that ability for the experience of young people to be together of all different abilities is very, very special. Other schools can do it, but in integrated education, we're testing the grammar stream one. So it means then that if a parent really wants a grammar, that sort of academic pathway, they don't have to forego integrated education and move into the grammar system. And wouldn't it be nice if everyone realised then that their local school was a good school, and no matter the ability of their child, they could go through the doors and do well, and do very well actually, because those who are academic are always going to do well, to be honest. I was a bit of one of those nerds when I was at school, but children who maybe need a bit more help will be in the same class and get the same help, get the help that they need. And sometimes the schools, even if there isn't a statement for a child, they'll still invest in that additional help because it's the right thing to do. So it's a bit of a different way of looking at education. It's not necessarily comprehensive, but it's recognising that there are different abilities, there's different socioeconomic backgrounds, different religions, and they're all equal, and they're all treated with the same level of respect, albeit some may need some academic help, some may need I definitely needed numerical help when I was at school, and there may be children who can't afford to spend £1,000 to go off skiing. So the school takes care of that. So you'll find a lot of the parent-teachers or parents associations will save up money to help children maybe whose families need a bit more support to access some of the other things that others would take for granted. And it's a holistic view that I think lots of schools do try to do, but in integrated schools we have pushed that quite a lot. I know I was quite not happy about a grammar stream because I don't believe in the 11 plus system, but I recognised for parents who would like integrated education and want that academic route, there isn't an integrated grammar school. And we're providing that through the system of the schools.
Can I just ask you a question about that? Because my kids don't go to an integrated school, they both go to voluntary grammar schools. But I think a lot of schools, and I think particularly the staff in the schools that my kids go to, often feel a little, I don't know what the right adjective is, but a little annoyed, a little uncomfortable when people advocate for integrated education, because they would say in both the schools that my kids go to, they're integrated. There's a high numbers of people from a unionist background, a nationalist background, a Protestant background, a Catholic background. There's different socioeconomic backgrounds, and all the things that you're lauding those schools provide. So I think my question for you and Michael is, why does it have to be this integrated status and stamp? Why are the schools that my kids go to, who seem to me to be doing a very good job in terms of integration, why is that not good enough? Because they're doing all the things that you're advocating for.
Then why not go for it? You know, it's, as you say, it's a stamp. It's a stamp that confirms an ethos. So if there's any school out there, and that's why we've had a huge number of controlled schools that have turned to becoming integrated education, it's not because they're changing themselves. They're actually adding more value to what they already are. It surprises them sometimes in those schools, and I've been through the system where they didn't realise that it wasn't just about children. It was about the Board of Governors, and it was about the teachers, and it was about the support staff. So some people don't get that and don't understand that, but this intentionality is there. For example, I think that St Columbanus in Bangor is amazing and has a huge diversity. But any child coming out of that, and I have interviewed some of them, say that they went to a Catholic school. The statues are there, they recognise it as a Catholic school, and their identity, if they were from the Protestant faith, wasn't really there. So this is the difference with integration, is it doesn't matter who you are when you walk through the door. Everybody's celebrated, and the school can't be named as being a Protestant school or Catholic school or another school or other faith school. It's very much of all of them, and that's slightly the difference. So when I say that just because the doors are open and you have a mix of children in the class, so what? It's that intentionality of bringing out.
It's not just the numbers, and I don't want you to answer this, Tim, but do those schools have like Gaelic football teams? Do they teach Irish, etc., etc.? No, I have one question of Kellie, moving slightly onwards, and I have to repeat, I'm not speaking for the IEF here, but I'm speaking personally. I'd like to ask Kellie, what do you think of shared education, and in particular, what do you think of the Struil campus proposal, which I personally believe to be almost an abomination, bringing the division cheek by jowl, as opposed to addressing the division. Imagine the children go through the gate in the morning in their separate uniforms and heading off to separate schools, and they might share the sports facilities or something. It really is pathetic, falling short of what it should be.
Do you know what? In areas where there isn't an option for integrated education, shared education is the only time when children can get together. And as much as I am really disappointed in the process of shared education because it didn't follow the Fermanagh Trust model that was set out, we didn't take it to its full concept. We've only delivered part of it. I am sick listening to children getting together and talking about the psalm, because that seems to be the only thing that we have cultural similarities with, when actual fact they could be talking about, what did you do on the 12th? Which band did you march with? What did you do at Easter? What did you know? You can mix it up with people. I just wish that shared education, I would love to see the outcome reports of it, to see what actual benefits the children have received from it and how many friendships they have built up from other communities, and that continues. The Fermanagh Trust model of shared education was the model that should have been followed. But it was only, to be honest, I'm come from a transport background, and I know that the most amount of money that's been spent on shared education is buses. Buses have made a fortune out of it. But actually, the Fermanagh Trust model was about, let's get the Board of Governors together and talk about how we can save money on paper or toilet rolls or whatever it may be. Maybe we should share a caretaker. Now, your maths teacher is brilliant and getting really good results. Could they come over and help our school and get the maths results up on our side? And naturally, it would come to the stage where, why are we walking across the road to get to each other? Why can't we just come together? And some of the work done by the University of Ulster on that discussion piece about small schools coming together, that shows when a community's involved and they want to have education provided for their children in a locality, that there's ways of doing that. So there's a lot of discussions. I have to say my disappointment on shared education is more to the fact that it's about paying buses than it is about getting children to actually spend a lot more time with themselves. Like in my day, it was EMU, dear goodness. Load of rubbish, to be honest, but I don't know the outcomes of some of the programmes. There's certainly young people who benefit from that, and they actually get to meet people who they would never otherwise do so. But does that extend outside of school? If the Fermanagh Trust model had been allowed to happen in the way that it was supposed to, then I think that could have led to a natural bringing together of community schools that may not have been integrated, but would definitely have been more like that. As far as Strull's concerned, my concern about Strull is how much money do we have to throw at it before somebody gives up on it. The delays on it are appalling. Northern Ireland's very good at being terrible at delivering programmes, and my goodness, that's one of them. I am disappointed that the opportunity is there for children to be educated together and they're all going to be in different buildings. And it's going to cost 10 times more than it should do. It's disappointing. Now, what I would say is the Strull campus, the schools that are involved in that have been left behind so badly that they're in such bad conditions of schools, they have to get new schools. I just wish that all those schools would come together and actually have that community conversation and maybe think about a smarter way of doing it so that they could all share facilities a lot better and come together without taking away their own ethos. But Strull's not the way to do it, not the amount of money that's being poured into it. But the schools in the area have been left in a dreadful state because of the concept of Strull. Those children and those teachers shouldn't be teaching in some of the states of some of those classrooms.
Okay. Kellie, thank you very much for coming along and talking to us about the third anniversary and some of the aspects of the bill. So, Kellie, thanks very much for coming and speaking to us.
Thank you.